well in the similar fashion that Cassie was, and then within 48 hours the tape vanished. And I think a lot of the fault has to be laid at the nature of the system. We used to say that all you need is consent, whether it's you sign consent or yes, we're good to go. But actually, when you contextualize it, these women that...
On Piers Morgan Uncensored, explosive revelations unfold around Diddy's recent conviction. The trial cracked open debates on consent, prosecution strategy, and the hip-hop industry's twisted power dynamics. With voices like Elizabeth Overson, DJ Vlad, Tony Busby, and Esther Kraku weighing in on the fallout, this isn't just about one man, it's about a culture in crisis. Let's break this down.
Okay, yes, they are drawn in by the glamour of being with someone like P. Diddy or a high-profile person. You can choose the names. They are drawn into the system, but nothing means that they deserve to be beaten up and treated like ragdolls in the way that Cassie and arguably this lady said. And so we need to be looking at the cultural issue as well. That's the fundamental issue.
This cuts to the heart of it. Legality doesn't protect dignity. Culture enables abuse. The system may validate consent on paper, but society's toxic norms allow women to be treated as disposable, especially in powerful celebrity spheres.
It's not just about you sign a piece of paper and you can make an NDA, keep you quiet or whatever. The culture is telling women that actually you can be treated this way because you happen to be in this space, and all that keeps everything above board is the legality. And unfortunately, the culture is our problem. It's not the problem of the federal prosecutors. It's the problem of us as a society. The PAs, the people that are handling their press releases, the lawyers, everyone, they are part of the culture, that culture of subservience and allowing these people to do things that are legally above board, but are horrible and just quite vile. I feel sorry for Cassie because I do think the prosecutors misled her. The case was very, very shoddy on many levels. You can't have a conspiracy with just one person. That's not a conspiracy, that's a thought. And so I think in many ways that case was always going to fall through. But I do think that these girls have been let down by a culture that has boiled down appropriate behavior to just legality and consent.
Okay, DJ Vlad, you posted on X after the verdicts came in, Cassie is guilty of the same prostitution charges Diddy was just convicted of. I interviewed 3 of the male escorts. All 3 of them said the same thing. Cassie picked them, contacted them for free costs, enjoyed the experiences and paid them. Meanwhile, she's sitting on $30 million and writing letters to the judge asking...
Here lies the scandal. The alleged victim, Cassie Ventura, reportedly orchestrated and profited from the very prostitution rings central to the trial. Immunity granted to her raises urgent questions of selective justice and prosecutorial strategy.
Him not to give Diddy bail. So pretty clear what your view is of Cassie Ventura there. What do you think should happen to her?
I mean, personally, I think she should be charged with the same thing that Diddy was charged with. Ultimately, he was convicted of prostitution. She was involved in the prostitution. Every male escort that I talked to said that she was the one picking the actual male prostitutes. She would book them. She enjoyed every experience. She was sort of guiding the whole thing while they were together, and she was the one that actually paid them. Ultimately, this is a domestic violence case that's ballooned into a RICO and sex trafficking and so forth. What Diddy did to Cassie in that hallway was absolutely horrible, but that is not what the trial was about. It was about RICO. It was about sex trafficking, neither of which made sense in this particular trial. And if you want to actually convict him for prostitution, Cassie is just as liable for that same prostitution that Diddy got convicted of, but she was given immunity in the whole situation. So I just feel it's really just a messed up situation.
That's a completely ridiculous stance, because you know what the consequences of her, not booking those prostitutes? We saw it in that hallway in the hotel, in an international chain hotel that were happy to take $50,000 to wipe it off the face of the earth. Those are the consequences. If she hadn't done that, it is very likely that she would have been manhandled in that way, even in the street, and someone would have been able to wipe the footage of that. I appreciate the fact that she hold on.
Case, which has nothing to do with
I appreciate the fact that she
was not charged with domestic violence. You're talking about a totally different situation.
I guess the question, Vlad, I guess the question that Esther's posing there really is, did she go along so apparently consensually with all the freak-off stuff, with all these escorts, because she
admitted to that?
Well, hang on. My question is, did she go along with it in the apparently consensual way because she was in fear of retribution from Diddy in a way we saw with the beating?
No, I don't think so. At the end of the day, this was an artist that had one hit song 20-something years ago. She had the ability to leave at any point. She was signed to a label, but labels leave artists that don't react constantly. She could have went. She stayed because she wanted to be in that particular situation. Now, people are going to argue with me and so forth, but at the end of the day, she stayed because there was no one else that was offering her a record deal. There's no one else that was spending millions of dollars on her. There's no one else that was showering her with gifts. So she decided to stay. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when the money ran out, when she married a broke fitness trainer and had to go move back in with her parents and the money completely ran out, then it's like, okay, let's sue Diddy and let's get $20 million out of him. That is my take on it. That's always been my take. That always will be my take.
Okay, Tony Busby, let me bring you in here. Just first off, what do we think is going to happen to Diddy here? What sentence are you anticipating?
I'm expecting 2 to 4 years, I would expect. I mean, he's not going to get 20 years, obviously. He's already has time served. There's going to be some mitigating factors. He doesn't have a prior record. However, there are some issues within the case that might be reasons for the judge to go a little bit higher than perhaps normal. But I would expect 2 to 4 years. What
is your feeling? You've obviously represented many Diddy victims in civil actions. You had over 100 people come to you with various allegations. What impact does this verdict have on the suits that you want to proceed with?
Zero. I mean, I was listening to Vlad there for a minute, and I'm sure that same kind of argument took place in the jury room. I mean, people have a hard time putting their head around a situation where somebody might consent one day and not consent the next. And there are people in this world that believe, well, you've consented once, so therefore you're consenting for life. That is not what the law says, and I can understand why there may have been people on that jury that had the same point of view, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that there's a lot of psychological issues here that people really don't understand about trauma bonding and how somebody might feel compelled to do something that they really don't want to do. But even if they said no one time, that is not consent. And I think in this trial, and we didn't have the benefit, or at least I didn't have the benefit of watching it day to day and seeing each witness and hearing how they said the things they said. All I was able to see was the transcript that I would receive on a daily basis. Obviously, the jury thought that the RICO situation was complete baloney. They thought, apparently, that this was not a RICO situation. There was no conspiracy, and they were trying to put a round peg into a square hole or vice versa. I did think that, given the testimony that I saw, that there were instances where Cassie and Jane were forced to do things, either through financial pressure or through extortion type pressure or through force, things that they did not want to do.
But the interesting thing on that, Tony, is that the jury clearly did not believe either woman when it came to any issue about consensuality. They just didn't believe any of it. I think pretty much across the board, it was clear they had not bought in to the suggestion that any of this was non-consensual.
No question. I mean, I think you're right. And sometimes juries do things that we don't expect. I go back to whether, each instance that this happened, did he have consent each time? Then I see Vlad's point. There were times when it looked like that Cassie was involved in setting some of these
well, there's no question of that. I interviewed the Punisher, the guy who gave evidence. He gave very powerful, eloquent evidence. And I've interviewed him several times. He's a very good talker, and he had no real kind of skin in the game. In fact, he was brought from the prosecution to give evidence, but actually ended up being a pretty powerful witness for the defense, it turned out, because what he said was everything was done through Cassie Ventura and seemed very consensual. Went on for over 2 years, a dozen or so encounters in hotels where Diddy just sat in the corner saying nothing. She booked him, she paid him, she organized it. Everything was driven by her. She seemed to have a good time. Everyone was happy. I thought that was very powerful evidence, actually, for Diddy, because it seemed to contradict everything that they were trying to position it as, which was this was all coercion.
Let me offer this up. The government settled in on using 2 alleged victims. They used Cassie and they used Jane. Early on, when this all started, we were contacted by the U.S. Attorney, and they asked us, can we speak to some of your clients? So we went to, and they told us, these are the ones we want to speak to. We made those people available. They talked to a couple of those people. But I think by that point, their team had decided that they had what they needed. They had the goods, if you will, to proceed with Jane and with Cassie. I think that was a mistake. I will say, as I watched the trial, or at least learned about the trial daily as it went on, I thought the government was doing what they needed to do to get a conviction. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Obviously, they did not believe that they believed that Diddy had consent, and they didn't believe there was a conspiracy. And obviously, the transportation to commit prostitution, that was pretty cut and dried. And I think everybody, no matter which side you fall out on, believed that there would be a conviction there.
But there is a point, isn't there, that which Vlad made, I thought, pretty compellingly, that if you're going to convict Diddy and you don't believe that it was non-consensual and Cassie did all the booking, why is she not being charged? And could it be that the reason that she turned on Diddy was to preempt potentially some legal exposure herself?
Who knows? We'll never know that. They gave her immunity early on, and they that's the horse they rode with, and we see what happened.
Well, I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think consent without fear of consequences is not, with fear of consequences, is not actually consent. So if you were going against Cassie, for example, and you're going to try her, all she has to do is show you that video and just say, look at what happens if I didn't do that. Now, I don't think it reached the threshold for the jury for RICO, which I completely understand. Like I said, a conspiracy that involves one is a thought. But this is why I say this is not a problem for the courts. It's a problem for culture and society. Cassie met P. Diddy when she was 17 years old. She signed a 10-album deal with P. Diddy by the age of like 20 or 21, which is virtually unheard of in this industry. I mean, I'm sorry, she wasn't Beethoven. She didn't have the kind of talent that would warrant that kind of record deal. She was clearly groomed. Now, amongst all of that, could you say she could have got up and left? Okay, arguably, yes.
She was with him 10 years.
Yes, but the thing is, he had
She was with him 10 years, and the Punisher was very clear.
Yes,
She did not give any impression to him of being anything but a very enthusiastic and willing participant. It's quite kinky stuff.
Look at what happened when she tried to break up with him and date, what's his name, the rapper, who had his car blown up. I mean, it's not that cut and dry. I feel like Cassie.
But Esther, we have lots of chats through the Me Too era and stuff, and obviously one of the things people are saying about this is that, in a way, it signals the beginning of the end of that Me Too movement, because for a long time, everyone was encouraged to believe women accusers. The moment they made allegations, they had to be believed. That was always, to me, a very dangerous proposition. It should always be they should be taken seriously, the allegations should be investigated properly, and then decisions should be made about whether there had been a crime. Very dangerous to believe accusers before you actually know whether they're telling the truth. But here we've got a situation, I think, where if he'd been in this case 3-4 years ago, he would have gone down.
I don't think.
I think the jury, I suspect, has moved with the times.
I think the whole Me Too issue was a separate kind of beast. P. Diddy and the environment that he exists, the hip hop industry, is a completely different kind of sleaze. And also, it was very cut and dry from that video.
Is it though? Is it any different to Harvey Weinstein, who claimed that a lot of what his stuff was transactional? I mean, he was convicted of rape and sexual abuse and so on. So obviously, again, juries didn't agree. But he painted a picture of a lot of kind of transactional relationships with people, right, where he believed this was all part of the sort of casting couch deal. That again has been, that's dinosaur stuff and was outrageous and wrong and everything else. And it turned out to be criminal as well. But I don't think there's much difference in the attitude.
There is a difference. I think hip hop has always come under fire for being quite sleazy. I mean, you can't listen to a hip hop track from 20 years ago without hearing the N-word or bitch. It's always been quite sleazy. They've always been quite actually vocal about the fact that they treat women like pieces of meat. And the women, a lot of the time, are happy to be treated that way because they get a lot from it.
So that's interesting, isn't it, Vlad? Because that is part of that hip hop culture. There's no doubt. A lot of women have embraced that kind of, very misogynist language, the lyrics and so on and so on. Is your feeling about what happened here with Cassie Ventura and Diddy that she was, notwithstanding the violence which would erupt more than once, we know there were other occasions when he was violent to her, that she enjoyed her life around this superstar rapper, notwithstanding that?
I don't understand the question. Can you...
that she accepted the violence and was prepared to stay in the relationship because she enjoyed everything else.
I think there was a very violent relationship. I think it was a drug-fueled relationship. I think there was lots of money and fame and jet-setting involved. At the end of the day, I think what happened to her was horrible. I think that tape showed just how bad the domestic violence was, but at the end of the day, this is not what the trial was about. The trial is about RICO. The trial is about sex trafficking. The trial is about prostitution. In fact, the only reason Diddy got convicted was because it was interstate commerce. All the other male escorts that I've talked to, like, for example, I talked to Don the dealer, who also had multiple sessions with Cassie. She said she was loving it. She was into it. She was setting the direction.
This revelation punctures the prosecution's case. The conviction hinged on a technicality of interstate activity, not on coercion or sex trafficking. The narrative of victimhood is deeply complicated, challenging the number Me Too era black and white framing.
At the end of the day, you could stay in a bad relationship, but you decide to stay in that bad relationship. This is really about the domestic violence, but the domestic violence goes back past the statute of limitations. So if you think about it, in this whole case, all the escorts I talked to were not, sent to a different state or a different country. They were all local. Like Don the dealer was in Miami, Punisher was in New York. If all these guys didn't travel across state lines, there would be no case at all. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
And with Tony Busby, at the end of the day, like he said, that the feds talked to multiple people that he's representing that were suing, but they decided not to use any of them, which makes me think that there wasn't any real credible, real evidence that they actually did anything wrong in the whole situation. Therefore, there's only two people that were actually used. The only person that was actually, that filed a lawsuit that was used in this case was Cassie. And there's over 100 lawsuits. So what does that say? That says the lawsuits are all nonsense.
Wrong. I listened to you.
I'm wrong?
And some of
which of your clients was used in this case?
Let's be clear about something.
Which of your clients was used in this case?
Hey, listen very carefully. If the alleged assault happened in LA, there was nobody flown in, there was nobody coerced and trafficked across state lines, they wouldn't use the client, obviously. These cases that we have filed in New York are filed under a New York statute for sexual assault and sexual abuse. That's completely different than transportation for prostitution or for sexual trafficking, and certainly has nothing to do with RICO. So you just made this grand conclusion that, the U.S. attorney talked to a few of these folks and decided they had no credibility. You are flat out wrong in that respect, because
none of them were used. None of them were used. How am I wrong if none of them were used? What's the
is that there was nothing
evidence
that
of
happened across state lines, and there was no sexual trafficking, which is what the case was all about. So it has nothing to do with whether these people were credible.
This segment exposes the deep contradictions and systemic flaws in the Diddy trial and wider industry abuse culture. We see the dissonance between legal definitions of consent and lived realities of exploitation, the suspicious immunity of Cassie despite her alleged complicity, and the prosecution's reliance on narrow interstate commerce statutes. It forces us to confront a culture where power and money warp justice and women's voices are wielded discordantly. What do you think? Is justice served or denied? Drop your take below and keep the conversation alive.